Okay, hey everybody, welcome back to Music Talks. It's been a while since I've done one of these episodes. My last episode was with Jordan Weitzer, another musician from my church, and this week we have Nate Bjorg, a new friend of mine, actually. I think we've known each other like for the past 2 years, I think. Gotten to play a bunch of music with Nate this past year, so I'm excited to talk to him. He is the frontman, founder, singer, acoustic, and many other instrumentalists of the band Wildered. And I'll definitely link his stuff in the description so you can check that out as well. So, Nate, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
I feel like
Thank you for that kind intro.
yeah, I feel like it's like we're doing this in a formal way, but I feel like we always end up talking about like music and like what we're working on and what artists inspire us and like what this songwriting process looks like. So I feel like in the conversations I've had with you, I'm like, oh, this totally makes sense. Like I'm like, I have to have Nate on the show. So thanks for doing it. So the first question I usually ask people is like, what has your journey with music looked like? And you can answer that however you want. It's pretty like broad stroke kind of question, but yeah,
Sure.
what has your journey with music looked like?
I am a. I'm definitely a had a background in it kind of guy. I had musical family growing up. Both my dad and my older sisters were musical in one way or another. They were. We were like a pretty big theater family, I would say, when I was a kid. And so my sisters did that, and they did like choir and um, yeah. So I think I was just around it, but I didn't really do much. I think I did theater as kind of just a thing to do when I was
Mhm.
young, because my sisters did it, and I had friends that did it. Um, So at some point, I think I had done it long enough that I was starting to get like a little more confident in it, and then a little more competitive. And somewhere along the lines, tried out doing like band and choir, and again, in certain ways, following in the footsteps of my sisters, but then also just trying some other stuff that they didn't necessarily do. Um, and yeah, I think friends definitely kept me involved, but I got really into it, and yeah, I wasn't like a dumb kid. I was homeschooled, so like we were like all homeschoolers are like kind of smart, but then I went to public school and I kind of just like stopped trying in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. So not recommended, but I always felt really confident in like the art and music classes compared to everything else. And so the same story kind of happened in college. Well, I got involved in church music too. That was a really big thing. Um, and that carried over into college. But then in college, I was able to kind of like do a lot of other writing in ensembles that were not church music. That was super helpful. And I have been doing it professionally ever since college now.
That's sweet.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of like songwriting,
Hmm.
um, like what was? Do you remember the first song or first chorus or verse that you were like that you wrote that you were like, oh my gosh, this is like this has potential? Like, did it just kind of like come to you, or have you been a person that's always like been writing?
Um, it's funny. I feel like I still every time I like get better at songwriting, and I almost hesitate to say get better at
Mm-hmm.
songwriting because in a lot of ways it just feels like getting better at or knowing myself better
Mm-hmm.
and getting better at like communicating that the way I want to, um, and the way that's authentic to me. So it's funny. I feel like I have new versions of that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, maybe like one of the first songs I wrote, I felt that way about a chorus. And then maybe like one of the first songs I wrote in college that was like a genre I wasn't used to. And then maybe like the first time I wrote a Wildered song.
Hmm.
And then even now, it's like there's like new things I unlock in songwriting that I'm like, oh, now this is like the new coolest thing. Um, but I think I am a feeler who needs to write.
Sure.
Um, and so for me, I really, really think that songwriting and creating art like really saved me in a lot of
Hmm.
ways and allowed me to process things that I could didn't figure out how to process until like several years after I started like making art.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, yeah, I think a lot of people can resonate with like the more you get to know yourself, the more like I think songs like almost come out of you, and like you get better at writing as you like get to know yourself as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like really powerful, really beautiful. What is like the instrument that you started on, or like what would you say is your strongest instrument that you know how to play?
I think the answer to both is voice.
Yeah.
I think I technically, like in an official way, did like drums and percussion first.
Okay.
Um, but I was like singing in theater and enjoyed singing on my own. And I didn't really like my drum playing and like percussion playing. It's it's good enough that I can like do it professionally, but I never got like really competitive with it the same way that I did like singing.
Sure.
And that was the thing that like through college I really worked on, you know.
Yeah. Um, okay, so musical theater, that's where you started. Did you have like a favorite musical like that you were in, or like
Mm,
one that you always like found yourself listening to the soundtrack of?
yeah, I think I was never actually in it, but my favorite musical probably still to this day is a musical called Ragtime.
Mm, mhm.
It's incredible. I saw it live with my sister, and we got to see the original actor of the lead that was now doing it at a smaller theater. He returned to the role, and I remember me and my sister just looked at each other with like tears in our eyes at the end of Act One. Like, oh my gosh, I think I cried like several times throughout the whole
Yeah.
show. It was so cool.
That's so cool. Yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. Yeah, I think it's so interesting cuz I think so many like artists I talk to, friends of mine that do music, it's like the two kind of, I don't know, like foundations of music are like musical theater, or like people who started in plays, and then church music as well. Like
Mm.
I know so many people, even if they're not like in church world, like they grew up, playing church music, or it's like you join the youth band and it's like,
Hmm.
oh, we need a drummer or we need a bassist, and it's like, okay, I guess I'll do that, and I think there's something like terrifying about that, but there's also something like really cool that I think helps you as a musician, like that you kind of have to like get ready quick, and it's like this
Hmm.
idea of like ready or not, like I'm just gonna like do this.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I don't know, I guess my question to you is like, in like growing up and like playing in church music, like how do you feel like that's like informed or prepared you for being like a professional musician now?
Hmm. Um, I I agree with you. I for some years was playing in a church band that our leader did not prepare,
Mm.
and that or it was like under the like maybe he thought that it was more organic,
Hmm.
if it was kind of more in the moment.
Yeah.
Um, so we had to like I was learning theory in some other outlets as well. Like I was really lucky that my high school had a really robust music theory uh, program that like didn't feel too hard. It felt
Hmm.
fun, and I learned a lot of theory through that. Um, but then I really had to apply it when I was in that group. It was me and like two of my best friends, a drummer, a bass player, and then me playing guitar. And we had this leader that would sing a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
songs. And we basically just had to show up and be able to put the songs together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes we knew them and sometimes we didn't. And so we maybe had like a little bit of a chance to run something,
Mm-hmm.
but that I think taught me theory really quick.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it'd be interesting to think about if that's the same now, because I think that like multi-tracks and things like that are
Mm-hmm.
so much more readily available.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny. I think like yourself, I think a lot of other people that came up in that type of church music thing, we like learned theory really quick
Yeah.
because we had to figure it out on the
Yeah.
fly, you know?
For sure. Yeah, it's so funny. Like I think the experience you just described, like I literally can think of like 5 to 10 of my other friends like who have like verbatim. It's like you get to church, it's like Sunday morning or Wednesday night or something, and it's like, okay, we're doing these 4 songs, and I know like one and a half of them, and we've changed the key a couple times, and so it's just like, yeah, I think you get really good at like the theory side of it, but I also think you get good at like, I don't know, the performance side of it and kind of just going for it. Like I think for me now, like leading worship, like if I make a huge mistake, I feel like because I've entered like the stage so many times where I'm like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like making a big mistake is more like, well, okay, this is where we are. It's like,
Yeah.
and I'll feel like I'll almost feel like the panic, like after the moment in a sense. But yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Like you kind of learn on the fly there.
I
Okay,
think that's a
so
testament. I think that's a testament to like good leaders too,
yes,
because I see that even like with professionals in the music scene a lot. Like you can tell when somebody came up in an environment where like blame was
yeah,
put on people and fingers were pointed,
yeah,
and you can tell when you work with somebody that had like gracious mentors and
yeah,
teachers, and it's a big difference. And like, um, yeah, maybe we were lucky that we had some of those more gracious leaders.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I've definitely been in those environments where it feels like the leader of that team or band, whatever it is, like it is almost like waiting for like those mistakes to happen and is gonna like stop and like call it out and stuff. And
Hmm.
I for myself being like a person receiving that actually like hinders my playing or my singing. Like
Yeah.
I would much rather like just go through a song, and if it goes horrible, like most of the time everyone knows that it went horrible. Like you don't need to like
Yeah.
like be like, "Oh my gosh, you missed, this 6th chord or whatever like in the
Hmm.
chorus." But yeah, if you come up with it of like, "Hey, let's just try it again," like let's like work through those kinks, especially in that chorus or whatever.
Hmm.
So, what are your favorite? This is such a hard question, but like, what are your top 3 songs? Like, either right now or like just a couple songs that you keep going back to.
Hmm. Yeah, this is like an impossible question to ask
Yeah,
people, right?
everyone I interview is like, this is an impossible question, which
Yeah.
that's why I kind of like asking it selfishly. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had to think about like I think yeah, it's literally impossible to answer, but like the way I think of it is like think of some of my favorite artists and maybe the song that like turned me on to them,
yeah,
and so of my picks, I basically just picked 3 of my favorite artists and like songs by each of them that kind of like got me into them and
yeah,
like really had an impact on me
yeah,
artistically. And so the first is um, I depending on how old you are, this could be considered sacrilege, but I didn't get into Bon Iver until the second album, the self-titled album.
hmm
Excuse me. And and like, of course, once I got into it, I listened to the first album too, and I think it's great. But I am just such a big fan of his like poetry and his lyrics, and like really big soundscapey type
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I think that album felt really big and wide and grounded at the same time.
Yeah.
And I just love it. And so that was really formative. I remember being at a party in high school, and one of my best friends, I had my guitar amp for some reason. I think it was like at my girlfriend's house at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so my guitar amp was like in the house. And one of my best friends was like, "You have to hear this." And he plugged his phone into my guitar amp and cranked it. And we were alone in this room and turned the lights off and just laid on the floor or the couch or something, staring up at the ceiling. And the little riff to Holocene starts.
Mm.
And that was the first time I had heard any Bon Iver, was just Holocene and that opening riff. And I remember just thinking, like, what is
Yeah.
this? Like, I don't think I had really heard, like, and I guess maybe he obviously wasn't the first to do this, but he kind of pioneered that genre and that style. I had never heard like the falsetto
Mm-hmm.
singing like that. And I really liked to sing in my falsetto, but I never really knew how to use it. Like,
Yeah.
it was never asked for in any environment. And that just was like, blew my mind
Yeah.
hearing Holocene for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I think of is Novo Amor. I got into a little bit later. Kind of a similar sound,
Mm-hmm.
like falsetto singing, really like soundscapey. And the first song I heard that I got really into was a song called Terraform.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much older song by Novo Amor, and Ed Tellett, who's now Low Swimmer. But that song, same thing. I just heard it. It also was particularly relevant to like what I was going through
Mm-hmm.
at the time as well. And so it just hit me like a truck.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to kind of cheat on my third one because I'm really into Bear's Den. And the song that first got me into them was Above the Clouds of Pompeii.
Mm.
And that's their first album is incredible, Islands, and it's just really folksy. But then their second album also hit me really hard, and their song Red Earth and Pouring Rain has like always been one of my favorites.
That's sweet. I feel like too, like when I like listening to your music, performing with you as well, like the kind of soundscapey, the use of like falsetto too, like I definitely see like a lot of that inspiration from like Bon Iver, especially. Like I think that like comes into your music a lot as well.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Because I think, I don't know, I keep coming back to like the church music thing, because it's like what I notice in church music for like male singers is like when you listen to these, like, you know, the album recordings, the songs are so high for most male singers, and so you have a lot of like these kind of like baritone ranges for like church music stuff. But then it's like I don't know, I've just been introduced to a lot of male singers in the last like couple of years where it's like they're using that like more higher range and a lot more falsetto, which I think gives like, you know, a really cool, you know, texture to it, and communicates like a totally different message with what you're writing about too.
Yeah, I think it adds like a nice emotion and delicacy that you don't always get to hear in male voices.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. How, for you as a songwriter, performer, like how do you connect your emotion and how you're feeling to the art you're creating? That could be through, you know, a particular song you're writing, or how do you view the relationship between what you're feeling and like whatever art you're creating?
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel like I have to write.
Mm-hmm.
Like I touched on earlier. I think that it's just been a coping mechanism for me for so long now. So it's definitely something that I have to do. So it's like the emotion is kind of built into it in that sense. But I mean, there's definitely like different kinds of writing. Like I have songs that I write that no one will ever hear, and it's just kind of like a journal. I have songs that I think are going to be that way, and then I end up realizing that I should share.
Mm-hmm.
I have songs that I go in with the intention of thinking it's going to be shared, and then it ends up just being a song for me.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think intention really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm really impressed with writers who are able to like write songs that are not about them all the time, and they just like find how to connect with it emotionally, even if it's like not something they necessarily totally relate to. And in some cases, you know, people can do that and really not feel super deeply emotional about it at all. But I'm just not that way. I've always had to write, and I've never had to really think about bringing the emotion in separately. But I guess if I had to try to articulate what that looks like for me, it's like intention and
Yeah.
what the intention behind making something is.
Yeah. That's cool. I love that so much. I feel like every time I talk to you about songwriting, I just feel like I like learn so much, because I think everyone approaches it a little bit differently, but like how, I don't know, I think sometimes I feel like, okay, I have to feel this thing and then write a song about it, contrasted with like this is what I like songwriting is something that actually is going to help me like as a person process through this event or whatever I'm feeling, and I'm going to bring that in. And I feel like that definitely comes through like your music as well, very like poetic for sure, but not just the vocals and the lyrics, but like in how you like what instruments you decide to use, how do you want it to sound as well. Yeah, I think that's really cool. So I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but I feel like this is so helpful, like for so many people that are like just starting their musical journey or seasoned professionals as well. So thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah.
So nice.
Do you want to tell the people like where people can find you, where people can check out your music, what kind of stuff you have coming up?
Sure. I primarily write for a project called Wildered, which Gabe knows well. And it's just like Wilder, ED, WILD, ERED. Wildered, Wild Red. And yeah, I have a weird name. I have a weird Norwegian last name, spelled Bjorge. I'm very used to spelling that name. But my website is just myname.com. But then Wildered is all the places. So that's pretty much it.
Sweet. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being a part of the show. And I obviously will link all that stuff in the description too, so people can check out your stuff. So thanks, Nate, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabe. It's an honor speaking with you.